Chapter.
Thank you.
This closed in 2007, by the way, and it's still vacant.
Right, in Rebecca.
And we picked it for the cover because of that S.
Yeah, we love the font. In fact, to be honest, though, how we got interested in photographing the storefronts in the first place was really driven by like a pure visual aesthetic. You know, this one, we just loved the store. I mean, we loved the signage. Coming from having photographed a lot of graffiti art is letter-based, and we were always very interested in letters and fonts. So this particular image, it just spoke to us so loudly, I guess you could say, that, you know, that's why we chose it. Plus, it kind of had double meaning because the title of our book, Storefront, The Disappearing Face of New York, we noticed that many of these stores started disappearing, and that's honestly what prompted us to start photographing them at a more rapid rate. At first we were kind of just doing it for ourselves. We would just photograph stores that visually, like, we liked their sign, we liked the neon sign, hand-painted sign, you know, something about it just spoke to us. And we were just basically, you know, amassing a huge collection of them, but we weren't showing them to anybody, we were just keeping it for ourselves. And then we started noticing that these storefronts were disappearing. It was not really our own neighborhood. I mean, we live in the East Village, and we've lived like basically in the same building for over 20 years, and in the village itself for longer than that. But sometimes we felt like, because you see it all the time, like things change, and you feel bad when they close, but you know, you don't realize the impact that it has on your neighborhood. But because we were photographing graffiti, we were going to outlying neighborhoods. We were going a lot to the Bronx and to outer boroughs, you know, even Staten Island, parts of Queens, Brooklyn, all over the place. And graffiti artists often repaint like the same wall over and over and over again. Like they find a spot and they kind of cling to it. So we would go back, like say after a few months, to this spot, and then we'd be like, wait a minute, what happened to that store that was like across the street? We got some candy there, it had a great sign, we love that place, where is it? It's gone. And then more and more of these stores started disappearing, and we're like, wait a minute, the neighborhood, something's wrong. It doesn't look the same, it doesn't feel the same anymore, it's losing its flavor. And certainly it's happening in the East Village and Greenwich Village to such a rapid degree. But like I said, in the beginning, we weren't even photographing the East Village. We kind of like forgot about our own neighborhood. It was really going to these outlying neighborhoods that really woke us up to like what was happening, all this rapid change. So that's how we got started photographing it. And the Storefront book, which was published like late 2009, by the time it came out, it was like in late 2008, by the time it came out, it was like January 2009, was all done with 35mm film. At the time, we didn't even own a digital camera. We started the project like in the late 90s, so it was, you know, really that's all there was for film cameras. I mean, I don't honestly remember when the first digital camera like came to be, but
We couldn't afford it.
we couldn't afford it. So, you know, we didn't have one. And besides, when we started photographing these, to us, film, like, it made sense because film is like the old school, and we were kind of photographing like these old school places. So even when eventually we did get a digital camera, we stuck with photographing everything with a 35mm film.
And it's interesting, now Canon only makes one film camera.
Right, at the time, like, as like we became more advanced with photography, we like would get better and better equipment. You know, just like anything, like anybody who's into stereos or cars or, you know, musical instruments, you know, you start with what you can afford, and then, you know, hopefully you can upgrade to something. So that's kind of how we did with our photography. I mean, to be honest, the camera that we used for a majority of these pictures was not an expensive camera. I mean, it wasn't like your beginner camera, but it wasn't a really expensive camera. It was pretty affordable, and we used rather inexpensive film because it was a costly project. Like, you know, taking a lot of these pictures, it adds up between the film and getting it developed, because it was color. We didn't do the developing ourselves. Like, we develop our own black and white because like our bathroom, it's easy. We don't have a window, so it's easy to make dark and out of it. But color is just, it's too, you know, it's kind of labor intensive and tricky, and it was just easier, and it was pretty inexpensive at the time, more or less, to get your film developed. You could get it done in an hour. I used to bring it over, we like this place, Alkit, that was on Park Avenue. They did a great job. It's no longer there. And, you know, I'd drop it off, like we went there so many times, they knew us, they're like, oh, come back in like a half hour, we've done even quicker. So I'd just walk the dog around the block and then come back and it'd be ready. I mean, that doesn't exist anymore. I mean, there's places to get your film developed, but rapidly, unfortunately, they're disappearing as well. So New York Nights is our follow-up kind of book to Storefront. What we did was we photographed everything at night, as the title says. A lot of the stores and places that we were interested in photographing during the day, really, there was something special about them, whether it was their neon sign, or maybe it was a bar, or a later night restaurant, like an after hours kind of place, simply wasn't open during the day, so it didn't make sense to photograph it during the day. So we said, oh, we have to, start photographing these things at night, and that's how this project came to be. In fact, many of the photographs that we took were very late at night, just to avoid getting people in the frame and just to get that certain, wouldn't you say, Jim?
Yeah, it's like an intangible feeling of the city, like after midnight. We wanted to go out when all the tourists had gone home and people working, like you see that guy resting, and just kind of like the last call of the night kind of thing.
Right, and since when we wrote the introduction to Storefront, which we finished the introduction in 2008, 1/3 of the stores we had photographed, and there's like 325 photographs in that book, were already gone, and now it's pushing 2/3. So we've gone from 1/3 to 2/3, almost. I mean, it's a tragedy. And New York Nights, even though that just came out in 2012, I think we've lost almost 20 something.
A good 20,
And in fact, one of them is due to close this week, which is our next slide, which is Dee Roberti's pastry shop. Now, we live very close by. In fact, from our apartment, we can see the glow of this neon. So it's kind of a favorite place to us, because not only do we get things there, but that neon sign, it's just, it's like a beacon. Right. And it will be sorely missed by us. And
the owners love their sign. They like to run it night and day. I don't know if you know the place, you've seen that sign.
They're one of the few establishments. Many places turn.
That's on First Avenue.
At 11, right by 11th Street. Like, it's not right on the corner. It's just a little bit in from the corner. There's a tile place on.
Yeah, in a secondhand clothing.
A secondhand clothing store, right? But anyway, Dee Roberti's was established in 1904, and the original name was Cafe Pugli's, because the owner was born in Puglia, Italy, and he had like family recipes dating back from Italy. So when he moved to the East Village, his family immigrated here. He opened up this pastry shop. Their bakery, like where they do the baking, is down in the basement, and they have this first level space. Now, what we found when we were photographing things for the Storefront book is not only did we start photographing the stores, we started interviewing the owners, because we felt like the stories that they had to share with us were really just as important as the photos themselves. And Dee Roberti's, it was really great because it was a family-owned business, and it was passed down from generation to generation, and it's like the 4th generation family members are now in the place. And when interviewing the owners, we found that many times when they didn't own the building, that was when their store closed. Like, it was especially like by time the year 2002 to 2006 rolled around, the real estate prices had become so high in many places in the city, even like the outer boroughs, things were getting so expensive that the landlords would raise the rent. And then these places that had like a very tight, budget, like they weren't making a lot of money, they simply couldn't afford the rent. Now, that isn't the case with Dee Roberti's. They actually own their entire building. In fact, at one point, the family did live upstairs from the bakery. But sadly, they're just kind of a victim of the older people being older, and, I guess partly the economy, being not as great as it was, and partly because people are, I guess, a little bit more health conscious and maybe not buying as many pastries as they once did.
And the cost of the raw materials, they said, is skyrocketed.
Exactly. We don't want to raise their prices really high. If you know the place and you go in there, their prices are super, super reasonable. I mean, we got a an apple pie for Thanksgiving, and it was $10.95. I mean, you know, what you pay for like a Entenmann's one or something like that is, you know, pretty close to that. So you really, you know, they kept their prices low, and maybe if they raise their prices, who knows? But you know, that's for the family to decide. And unfortunately, their last day is supposed to be Friday, but we've heard that maybe they even close sooner. They're kind of like just basically selling out their inventory. So if you want to go in, go check it out. They have a beautiful tile floor, and they have a tin ceiling, and they have a lot of original fixtures.
Do you know who's buying it?
I asked, and they wouldn't say, but what they did tell me is that the person supposedly is going to keep the neon. They're leaving the big neon outside. I mean, this is what the granddaughter told me. I mean, she knows me, and I don't think she would not be honest, but I mean, you never know. People are very attached to their neon, so who knows what happens to it, but we hope it's not jumped, and because that's happened, and we'll show you a couple other slides down the way where unfortunately the sign was just, you know, thrown out, basically. Now, Venero's is right down the street, like that's on 11th Street, Venero's, whereas the other one is on First Avenue, but they're kind of like, it was a very big Italian neighborhood, the East Village, just that part of the East Village at one point in time, and I guess they were always like friendly competitors. But Venero's also is a family-owned business, and again, they do own the building, so hopefully they're not, at least if they're not at the mercy of their landlords. But for us, we photograph Venero's at night because of their beautiful, beautiful, beautiful overhanging sign. And in fact, Robert Zerilli, who's the fourth generation owner, James can tell you the story. He's so proud of the sign.
They said they could make him a new one that would be way cheaper to run and repair and keep going, but he didn't want to do it. He said, no, I love my sign. It costs like 10 grand to refurbish that and keep it going, and every time it rains it'll shut off.
Yeah, I mean, since we live nearby, we were always walking the dog and we're like, oh, look, it rained last night. They goes like, okay, like you'll be missing RIA. And then like hours later, like he's on top of it, like Robert calls his guy, and then we'll see the truck, you know, and then the guy's up there on his ladder, you know, mixing around with the, you know, stuff, doing what he ever has to do. But
and the store predates electricity. Tell that.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Robert told me that his family, what happened was the store's been there since it was 1894. It says it right there. That of course it does predate electricity. Everything was made by hand, and he said when electricity was being first introduced, like towards, you know, sort of in the area, and when he meant in the area, he was saying specifically like around Gramercy, that it was being introduced first, that his, I guess it was his great-grandfather said, oh, I want electricity for my store, and they said, no, this is a poor neighborhood, and you guys can't have electricity, and then if you want electricity, you're going to have to get, like, a couple hundred people to sign,
to go in with you,
you know, a form saying that they approve of electricity in this neighborhood and so on, and that's exactly what he did. So he got all those names, and he, you know, went to Con Ed and said, yeah, time for electricity, and yeah, that's when he finally got electricity. Of course, that made it easier for him, and that we could operate machinery instead of mixing everything by hand. They also had their bakery down in the basement, just like Di Roberti's, but they don't really use that basement bakery anymore. Actually, that was a coal-fired oven that was in their basement. They don't use the coal-fired oven anymore. They've moved their baking operations to their second floor. It's actually quite modern and nice. We were able to see it, and it's quite fascinating. You know, the large, you know, machinery used for like the mixers and all that. But yeah, he was saying that kind of like the recipes, like to make things with the coal-fired oven, like their bakers, they had to like relearn, because coal-fired is like super, super hot, and like everything bakes really quickly, so they kind of had to, you know, change things around. But it's a really wonderful place, and again, fantastic, authentic cannolis and pignolis, the special little cookies.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm so sorry.
Oh,
I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, not at all.
Thank you so much.
You can wait in line like 45 minutes in there
Oh, at
on a
least.
Saturday night.
Yeah, some
Oh,
people, you have to take a ticket when you go inside.
Yeah,
There's a
you
little
could-
ticket thing, and you get a ticket, and then they call your number, kind of like this, like would do with like an old butcher or something like that.
How late are they open till on the weekdays?
Now,
Oh, how late are they open to, huh?
They're open pretty late. I think it's 11 p.m. on weekdays, nights, and I think it's
They
like
have a
1
little
o'clock
cafe
in
in
the
there, it's
morning
nice.
on the weekends. It's open pretty late. Now, Must Saves the Day was another unfortunate business in the East Village that's closed. It was in business from 1966 to January 2009, and
It was made famous by Desperately Seeking Susan.
Yeah.
right,
You
the
know,
movie Madonna.
where she bought the jacket, Madonna buys the jacket in there. And that's been gone now for a
Since
while.
2009.
Yeah, and there's been like a noodle shop there, and now it's vacant again.
Yeah, it's just a vacant space, so it's very sad. I mean, the owner wanted to stay, but they raised his rent and he could no longer afford to stay there. And you go by there now and it's just empty. I mean, it was a ramen noodle place, but now, I mean, I guess they couldn't afford it either, and now it's just sitting there empty for like at least 2 years or maybe more. It's been quite some time, so it's very, to us, it's very painful to see when these places close and then they just remain empty. It makes no sense. You think, well, wouldn't the landlord want to have like some sort of steady income? Like, wouldn't it be better to have a little bit of money than it be empty? But I don't know. I'm not sure what they're thinking. Now, this is a place, luckily, is still in business. This is Gem Spa. Now, this is an older photograph. If you know the place, it doesn't really look like this. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. They have a newer sign, and they've changed their awning a little bit, and now they have Zoltar outside. A couple of things, but that's right at the corner of St. Mark's and 2nd Avenue, and it's been in business since the 1940s. And they're known for their egg creams, and if you've ever had one from there, they use the original mixer, like from the 1940s. And the owner told me that, I mean, it's been passed along, they've had many different owners over the years, but they've always like taught each other the special recipe they kind of use to make their egg creams. And he's told me that the secret was that they keep their milk in their ice cream freezer. Because
It has to be super cold.
yeah, it has to be super cold. An egg cream doesn't have eggs and it doesn't have cream in it. It's just milk and seltzer and like a flavored syrup. So it's actually very, very simple. But he said the key to theirs is that they keep the milk in the freezer.
And as we shop more and more corner stores throughout the whole years, we notice those newspaper racks disappearing.
Yeah,
Those aren't out there anymore.
That's definitely, I mean, I remember interviewing a newsstand owner not too long ago, and he told us that, you know, he used to order like 100 New York Times on the weekends, and like, you know, they would sell out, like
Right.
it wouldn't even, like maybe he should have ordered more of them, and now he's like, oh, I ordered like 10? And I'm like, oh my God, and forget all the other papers too. I mean, they just don't sell. I mean, everybody's just looking at the news online and stuff. Now, Karawicki and Sons Meat Market, this is another place that is no longer in business, and it's kind of sad because we knew the owner and we would get different items there from time to time. And as you can see in this photo, because I think this photo is probably like from 2002 and 2003, that there's meat hanging in the window. I mean, it's literally on hooks hanging in the window. That that's their homemade kielbasa and different sausages. And it was a family-owned store, and it specialized in Eastern European sausages and hams, and the owner's family is originally from Ukraine, and in fact, in the window right here, this is like a certificate, like to be a butcher in Ukraine was like a very big deal, and you had to get like special certification, like go through special training, like it was kind of like an apprenticeship, like you would, I guess as a young boy, you would learn the trade, and after you were deemed like, you know, good enough or, you know, learned enough, that you would apply and you get the certificate, and that's actually the certificate from his grandfather when he was a butcher in Ukraine.
And then the city came in and said he can't hang his smoked meat in the window anymore.
Right. What happened is the city decided for, you know, whatever reason in 2005 that this sort of establishment could no longer hang their smoked meat products, you know.
Which they've been doing for hundreds of years.
Right. And I mean,
Because
they
they don't
don't.
smoke, they're safe.
Yeah.
Exactly. The owner told us, he's like, if people got sick from my food, I would have been out of business like long ago. Like obviously there is
Yeah, he
no
knows what he's
problem
doing.
here. But the city.
So he slowly went out of business once they yanked it out of the window, because
Right.
the whole business, he said, was built on smell and the
Exactly.
aroma, and when you walked in there, he
And the
said,
site,
he's like, when I walk in here, it feels like I'm going out of business.
Right,
He's
so
like,
he was very upset because they told him it has to be kept in refrigerated units.
which was down in his basement.
Right, his refrigerated units were down in his basement, and they were too big and they were bulky, like he couldn't bring them upstairs, so everything was down in his basement. You'd walk in the store and it looked like, it looked like it was going out of business.
The meat
So-
guys always, at one point, the city came around and told all the meat guys they have to get rid of their big wooden butcher blocks that they've had for decades and decades and decades and switch over to plastic.
And
then-
plastic actually
Was worse.
holds
Right.
bacteria.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So he's like, I threw away these decade-old butcher blocks that we cleaned with salt, and they were like worn in the middle from being scrubbed. And he's like, and then they come back 6 months later and they tell me to go back to wood.
Right, so, I mean, such is the city, and I mean, we really felt for him because like 2 years later, he closed the
And it
business.
became a Kim's Video,
Right, it was a Kim's
but now Kim's
Video.
Video's gone.
And now Kim's Video's gone, so the storefront is empty at the present time, so we're not sure what's gonna take over there, but, Mr. Kuriwicki did own the building, so this is one of the cases where, I mean, a lot of times, like I said, it was because the owner didn't own the building anymore, and that's why their business was forced to close, but in this case, it was really the city, kind of like their new regulations and their rules, which made, in this case, no sense at all. I mean, it's one thing to have like the ratings, like that they have in the restaurants, you know, some people are, you know, like that, some people may not, but this was just a ridiculous
Yeah, he was
thing.
very frustrated, you can imagine.
Yeah, he was extremely
When did
frustrated.
it go out of business?
And this is another
Honey,
place.
when did Kuriwicki go out of business?
2007.
2007.
In 2005 is when the city made them take the meat out of the window, and then they lasted another, 2 years, and then he closed.
So good, what, the second?
That's between 6th and 7th?
Kuriwicki?
Yeah,
That was
Kira.
on, First Avenue?
First Avenue between, I think it was between 6th and 7th. Now, this is on 2nd Avenue, this is another Ukrainian.
They have plastic meat in the window.
Right, now you see, again, this is an older.
That's
photo.
real meat, but
And
now
this is
they,
real meat. If you go there now, they have meat, looks like meat, but it's just like plastic.
but they shoved the
things.
refrigerator like right up close to the window.
Right, so they have a refrigerated unit that's like you can see from the window. So, I guess that was a good investment. They were able to make it, and it's been there for 44 years. So it's quite an old business. We like these little, like the sign has those like kind of like letters that I don't know how they're tacked on there, but I think one of them fell off.
Yeah, the meat
Well, in
is
the last
different
few
now.
years, and they kind of like put a new letter there,
Right.
but it still pretty much looks the same. So, Mr. Basinski is now like, when we interviewed him, he was in his 80s, so maybe he's pushing 90 now. He had no children of his own, but he had a longtime manager, that Mr. Ilnicki, who's kind of taken over the business. So it's still kind of a family-owned place. It's very nice. And during their Orthodox Easter, we happened to pass by, and the line was like...
Yeah, down at St. Mark's. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, down at St. Mark's.
Yeah.
Now, Block Drugstore, the next slide, we photographed at night. We love this drugstore. In fact, he's our pharmacist, Carmine Palermo is the owner. He's such a wonderful man.
Yeah, we put in both books.
Yeah, it's in the storefront book. We shot it during the day, and it's a straight-on photo. But then we felt like, we really have to capture this neon glowing at night. And it's one of the few places that we put in both books, because most of the time we didn't really want to have any overlap. But we felt so strongly about this neon sign. And as you can see, it's been since 1885. Now, Block Drugstores was there was more than one. That's why it's stores. But what happened was the present owner's father used to work for Block, and then Block sold him the store, so it kind of like went independent. So it is an independently owned drugstore. And if you go inside, it's really neat. Like there's an old postage stamp
Machine.
like those things where you can buy postage stamps, like a little pull-down meter, and there's like that scale where you put in like a quarter, and you can weigh yourself.
There's
So
all the little wooden drawers. behind.
yeah, and he's got like where Carmine is, like when you walk in, it's just like straight back. You can see behind him, there's like all these little drawers where he keeps like the drugs, they're the old drawers, and so it's really nice. And Carmine told us that when Duane Reade and Walgreens and Rite Aid and CVS and all these big box drug retailers started coming into the neighborhood, he had some hard times for a little while because a lot of his customers started going to these chain stores. But oddly enough, he said, you know what? In the end, it worked out for me because they got treated so horribly at these chain stores that they ended up coming back, and not only that, they recommend to their friends, and he's like, now they move out of the neighborhood and I'm shipping their drugs down to Florida. So, you know, he's doing really well. And he said to me, you know what? When you go to the chain store, they don't know who you are. You're just a face. They don't know you by name. I know everybody by name, by sight. When they give me a new prescription, I'm like, wait a minute, I know what drugs you're on. You shouldn't be on this. And he calls up the doctor and he tells the doctor, no, that's not going to work out. That you forgot this person's on such and such from another doctor. You know, you better switch the drugs. You're not going to get that at the chain store. I mean, maybe they look something up on the computer, and if it spits it out that maybe there's some drug-drug interaction or whatever they call it, you know, maybe a warning label comes up. But I mean, they're certainly not going to go the extra mile and call the doctor for you and have a conversation with the doctor. So, you know, if you need a drugstore and you live nearby, we highly recommend Block Drugs.
That's on 2nd and...
Yeah, 2nd and 6th, right on the corner. Now, Raoul Candy Store on Avenue B is another, it's Avenue B by East 13th Street, has been in business since 1979. And the owner is really nice. I mean, you can see in Spanish, there's a sign, like, he's always tried to keep kids out of drugs in the neighborhood. And he always, like, promoted, like, okay, buy, you know, candy, kept his prices low. And he's just really nice gentleman. And, you know, he didn't want any, like, bad, like when the neighborhood wasn't so great, like he wouldn't allow people to like hang out and pander around there, so.
A lot of neighborhood people, you see them in their chairs set up out front there, they hang out. A lot of these small stores become like community centers.
Exactly.
Where it's a place to hang out, tell stories and stuff, and it's just a nice little shop.
Right, if you want to know what's going on in the neighborhood, you go there and you'll quickly find out in like 5 minutes. Now, McSorley's Old Ale House, as you see, established in 1854, that's on 7th Street by Cooper Square. It's been in the East Village so long, it was actually an all-male establishment. And it was known by the slogan, good ale, raw onions, and no ladies. And what happened was that the female customers actually wanted to go there, and a lawsuit was brought up by the family who owned it, the McSorley family, and they presented their case in 1970. It was the owners ended up losing the case, and it resulted in McSorley's Law, which prohibits sex discrimination in bars, hotels, restaurants, airplanes, golf clubs, and other public accommodations. And the owner, Matthew Marr, told us that he was working for the McSorleys at the time as a bartender, and he told us that the McSorley family was so angry that they lost this lawsuit that they had to actually admit women to the bar, that they decided to sell him the bar. Because prior to that, it had been passed down from you know, father to son, father to son, father to son. It kept in the family. He said, never in a million years would I ever have had the opportunity to buy this bar. It was just that they got so mad at the decision. They're like, I can't deal with this place anymore. And they sold it to him. And he's like, believe you me, I remember him shaking his hand. He's like, if it wasn't for the women, he's like, the women are running my business now.
They only have 2 types of beer, light and dark.
Right, and it's a great place, like there's sawdust on the floor, and they have that old potbelly stove.
Yeah, it's
and
quite a place
like,
to go.
Although I would like to point out that women always went to McSorley's, but they dressed in drag.
There you go, see?
Yeah.
Something McSorley's does not like to admit, and I will say the first time I was there in the mid-70s, they were still pissed off, and the waiter threw the mugs of beer on the table. You know, it was this silent rage.
I mean, from what Matthew Marks said, I mean, that makes sense, because he said that they were really, really infuriated.
Yeah, they wanted to get rid of it.
Right, I mean, you know, and it's such a popular spot. Now, 2nd Avenue Deli, everybody's like, oh, yeah, and it's sad because this place is a Chase Bank now, so,
Ew.
yeah, exactly. It's on 2nd Avenue, right at the corner of 10th Street, and it was opened in 1954, and what happened was, it was opened by Abe Liebowall, who was a Jewish immigrant from Russia, and it's kind of a tragic story because he was killed during a robbery after the restaurant closed in 1996, and his brother Jack took over, ownership of the restaurant, but he was forced to close in January 2006 when they raised the rent, and this is a 2,800 square foot restaurant, was raised from $24,000 a month to $33,000 a month. And that was in 2006, granted, so you have to think like what $33,000 would mean today, but that's quite an increase, 24 to 33. And they ended up actually reopening. They have, they have a location in the 30s now. They do not have this overhanging neon sign. I really don't know what happened to it. The overhanging neon sign is gone. We loved it.
The Yiddish Theater Walk of Fame is still on the sidewalk
Right,
if
you
you go
can
there.
see the little squares.
If you go there today in front of the Chase Bank, they're still there.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because this area was like kind of, I guess, what you'd say the epicenter of Yiddish theater. There were all these Yiddish theaters in the neighborhood, and they kind of like made this Yiddish Walk of Fame. So at least like when Chase took the space, they left that in the sidewalk, but they didn't rip it up. I mean, I don't know. I guess if anything, you can say that was perhaps a good thing. Now, Moisha's Bake Shop, this is another favorite of ours. Now, this is an old photo, and don't be alarmed with the graffiti. It doesn't look, the sign looks the same except for the 2nd Avenue. It
Yeah, that
fell
blew
off.
away in one of
There
the
was a
stores.
big windstorm. I remember walking by one day, I think you were with me, right?
Yeah, we used to see it dangling.
And it was just dangling, and we were just like, oh, it's gonna fall, we would like that, but we didn't get it. I don't know what happened. I think for a while, like, we saw that it had fallen, like, on the awning part, and then that, like, then it's gone now. I don't know what ended up happening, but they have painted it. I think there's an ATM, right, Jimmy? There's
There's ATM.
an ATM there, but this was taken, I think this photo was like 2001. At the time, there was like a lot of graffiti in the neighborhood, so maybe if people are kind of like frightened by all that, don't worry, it doesn't look quite so bad. But I assure you, inside is the same, and they have amazing like just the hamantaschen and the babka and the strudel. Everything they make is fresh. They don't use any preservatives. They make everything right there on the premises. Originally, it started out further down the Lower East Side on Suffolk Street by Grand in 1948, and it was moved to this location in 1977. Now, the next one, Russo's.
Where was that? The bakery?
Oh, the bakery's on, that's 2nd Avenue at 7th Street. Now, the Russo's is on 11th Street. It's actually right next to Venero's, the pastisseria, and this has been there since 1908, but actually it hasn't been in this location since 1908. They used to be located directly across the street.
Which is a school now.
Right, what happened was that they had that space, and then one day, Jack and Jenny, who owns it, he's like, oh, my father, they told my father, oh, no, I think it was his aunt, you gotta get out of here, we're building a school. And like, that's how it was back then. Like, the city would just come and they would just like, give you like whatever it was, like a few weeks or something, and just say, listen, we're doing something with this property and we're taking it. So he walked around, he found this spot, and he's been there ever since. And they make their own like fresh mozzarella every day. It's like down in the basement. That's why you see like always when you go by during the day, like this is open, and you peek down there, you can see like they're making everything. And
They make a great sandwich.
Yeah, we love their sandwiches. They make fresh, like, they have bread delivered. I think they get their bread from Parisi, I'm pretty sure. He told me that. And, like, semolina bread. And their caprese sandwich is, like, fresh mozzarella with roasted pepper and
sun-dried tomatoes. Oh, it's great.
It's really, really wonderful.
Yeah.
Where is this?
11th Street, right by 1st Avenue. And theory, St. Mark's has been in business since 1964. It's owned and operated by the Otway family, and You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown opened at St. Mark's in 1965 and kind of put the theater on the map. Now, this has an amazing story to it. When we first passed by, the owner was like just basically outside, and we told him, hey, we're gonna come back at night, we want to photograph this. He's like, oh, okay, because we were asking him when does he light his neon, because the neon's not always lit. And he's like, oh, well, I usually light it when there's a performance. He's like, let me give you the schedule, and he was really nice, and he's like, okay, you can come here and this, and this. And he was really accommodating, and when we said, oh, we'd like to sit down and interview you, he said, okay, that'll be great, but I want to give you a tour. He's like, I'm not gonna, I have a lot to tell you, but I have to show you too. And oh my God, I mean, wait till you hear the story. I'll let Jim say what.
It used to be run by gangsters, and when they were going through the basement, there's all these like secret rooms, and they found these two big cast iron safes. So he called the gangster that used to own the place.
Right, the father, it's now owned by the son, so the father called the gangster, like, who was like basically mob connected. His name was Walter Scheib, who was living in Florida at the time. He called him up and he said, this is the exact quote, I'm too curious to leave them closed, but I'm too cautious to open them without you. Because, he knew he was mobbed up, and he's like, he had no idea what was in these safes.
So they flew this safe cracker in, this like mob safe cracker, and they went to the first safe, and they cracked the safe. It took like hours, he said. They finally get the thing open, and it's like Geraldo Rivera, it's empty.
Right.
So what they used to do with safes they didn't care about was turn them over, flip them on their side, and dynamite the bottom, when they didn't care what was in it. So the second one, they said, okay, screw this, we're just going to blow the bottom.
Right, why spend all the time?
Right, they blew the bottom, and it was like $2 million
Right.
from that era
Yeah, what
of
happened?
silver certificates, and there was like half-eaten dinners in there.
Yeah, it was $100 1928 gold certificates, and they
The total
ended up
of $2
finding,
million.
right, $2 million worth inside the safe, along with an oyster dinner, like the remains of an oyster dinner, and all
Some
this
cigarette
stuff.
packs.
Yeah, so Lorcan Otway has like surmised that what happened was back, during Prohibition, maybe the place was getting raided or something like that one night, and the guys were like eating downstairs at the time. They had heard from upstairs that they were going to get raided, and they had like everything in the safe.
What
like
they were eating, everything.
What they were eating.
And then there's secret
like,
passageways
there was a pack
out
of
to the other
cigarettes in
building.
there. Right.
If you go in the theater today, you could see the door.
Right, they made a tunnel so
Right,
the
the
guys
door to
could
the tunnel
exit
they
out,
used to-
and they were actually, because this is on the side street on St. Mark's, so then they would exit out onto First Avenue, so the tunnel kind of
You
like
can still see the little
went-
door.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. So
So the shy guy started just shoveling the money into a bag.
right, and then this is the worst part. He didn't even give the Lorcan Otway's father not even 1 cent, nothing, zero. And in fact, Lorcan told us, oh, his father was scared for his life because like a few years later he went behind on his payments to Shive, because I guess he didn't get a bank loan, like he kind of worked out like a personal loan of some sorts with him, and then he fell behind on the payments and he got really scared. And he said, oh, thinking back on it, he probably sold the building to my father, knowing that my father was like the perfect patsy. That like the guy knew all along that there was stuff in there, but it probably belonged to a different mobster who had maybe passed away in the time being.
So Shive stole it from
right,
another
so
mobster,
basically Shive stole
setting
it.
up this guy's father for a patsy.
Right, so if the other guy ever came looking for the money, he would just point out, I don't know anything, you have to talk to the Otway family. So,
Yeah, he must have it.
yeah, he must have it, so. Anyway, he said that Shive laundered the money like and ended up buying, like making more hotels like down in Florida or something.
But he's incredible. We spent like 4 or 5 hours with him.
Yeah, he was really great. And they have like a gangster museum, like with a lot of, like you can go there, it's right next door, and you can see a lot of the stuff. You can see the safe.
Yeah, the
was
safe is there.
that wasn't blown up, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
is upstairs, so you can see that, because they looked identical. Now, another actually gangster sort of hangout was this place, John's Italian Restaurant, which it's on 12th Street. It's close to 2nd Avenue. It's been in business since 1908. And it's actually one of the oldest Italian restaurants in the East Village. And it operated as a speakeasy during Prohibition. And the owner actually erected a trapdoor located on the side of a 1919 General Electric refrigerator that led to the upstairs. And the mom used to make like homemade hooch in the backyard. And what they would do is they served it like in a little espresso cups. So if anyone ever came, oh no, just, having our Italian espresso and everything is fine here. We're not drinking any liquor.
And they have a big mountain of candles in the back that have been burning supposedly since Prohibition ended.
Right, when Prohibition ended, they started burning these candles, and then they've been burning ever since. Sometimes, as Nick puts it, Nicky, who's the present owner, he's like, oh, so we have to give them a haircut. Like they trim them down, and then they just keep on adding more and more and more to them. But it's a really great place, and they have a really authentic Italian food. But they also, since we took this, they've added like vegan menu to it too. So it's even if you have vegan, people that they can eat there as well. Now, KGB Bar has been in business.
Honey, where's John's? On 12th Street.
12th Street,
Right off 2nd Avenue.
Yeah, and you can see like the glow of their neon from down the street. They usually keep it lit all night as well, which is really wonderful. Now, KGB Bar has been in business since 1993. It has a really interesting history. It was a speakeasy run by the gangster Lucky Luciano during Prohibition. In 1948, the Ukrainian Labor Home purchased the entire building and built a private social club for Ukrainian socialists. And the owner today is actually, his father was a Ukrainian immigrant, and he was a member of the club. And his father was blacklisted by the U.S. government, and it was actually, he spent a lot of time with us, Dennis, the present owner, telling us that, at the time it was just like, it was kind of like the sentiment where a lot of people, not a lot of people, but like some people, especially the government today, they're very suspicious of like anybody of Arab descent, like, okay, are they terrorists, this, that. It was kind of the same thing with the Ukrainians, like they were just regular people and they were just blacklisted even if they were just doing nothing. And he said it was always very hard for his father because like he couldn't get a real job, nobody would hire him, so he'd like go kind of like 2-bit jobs here and there, but he's like, that caused him to like drink a lot and therefore hang out at this club. And Dennis actually went to law school and became a lawyer. And while he was in law school, he started hanging out at the club again, just to like drink, to unwind after class and stuff. And the owners of the Ukrainian Socialist Club, they knew him because like he kind of grew up at the bar. Like I guess his father used to take him like when he was in his diapers and like sit him on the bar. So they knew him and they said, you know what, if you need some extra money, you can open up a little space. He wanted to make a little art gallery, so he opened a space in the basement. And that closed, but they went through some hard times and they ended up getting in touch with Dennis again and they offered him to buy the whole building. And when he did buy the building, he started going through everything. He found all this old Soviet propaganda that had been locked in a closet. He said that they were really, really paranoid, like all the old, all the old Ukrainians. And they were still scared about like McCarthyism and all that stuff, and they had locked away like.
Yeah, so hanging in the bar today, there's some of this stuff. It's really cool.
Right. So he decorated the bar with all this real, authentic stuff, and most of it's like anti-Nazi, and it's kind of neat if you go inside. Now, Mars Bar, unfortunately, is now a TD bank. This was a real like travesty for the neighborhood because it was kind of like one of the last dive bars in the East Village, and to us, I mean, this is what is it? Roy.
Roy's passed away.
Yeah, he passed away, but he was kind of like a fixture, always like hanging outside the bar, and it was just there was a lot of public outcry when this place was closing, and supposedly it hasn't happened yet. The owner like is going to go in with some other people and kind of like reopen a bar and the building, but I'm not really sure you haven't heard anything, right, Ted? Yeah, so I'm not really sure what's happening with that, but CBGB's is another business that we closed. That was located on Bowery by Bleecker Street, and it opened in December 1973 and it closed in October 2006, again due to it lost its lease, like they raised the rent too high and they couldn't afford it. The club was owned by Hilly Crystal, and they wanted to like reopen, I guess. I'm not sure if it happened in Vegas because I've actually never been to Las Vegas, but they took a lot of the original interior inside, like a lot of the fixtures and stuff, and they said they were going to reopen something. I mean, Hilly Crystal passed away, but I guess maybe relatives or something. But it became really well known as the birthplace of American punk rock, and groups such as Television, the Ramones, Patti Smith, and Blondie got their start there. And according to Crystal, CBGB's stood for country, bluegrass, and blues, the kind of music I intended to have, but not the kind that we became famous for. And the OMFUG stood for other music for uplifting gormandizers. Gormandizer being a voracious eater of, in this case, music. Now, this place, this is like, to us, we had to photograph this at night because this is a riot of color. Now, we interviewed the owner of Milan, which is on the upper left-hand corner of the photo, and they've been in business since 1982.
It's 3 Indian restaurants.
Right, there's 3. Like, there's the one on the bottom, the Royal, and then there's the Panama 2, and then the Milan. They all like compete with one another. If you see these guys standing outside, like they didn't pose for the picture. They are always outside.
You have to kind of run by because
Right, if
pulling
you
it
walk
in.
by, they're like, come in. Yes, we have room. Yes, plenty of space.
Yeah.
Come. And
You gotta-
like, when there's like lots of people, they give like free papadum, which is like that flat bread. Like they give it to you out in the street so you won't get hungry while you're waiting because it's like really tight inside. And the funny thing, the first question that we asked the owner of Milan was, what's the deal with the lights? Because we're like, hello, there's so many. And then it was really a funny story because he said that they first put them up like in the early 80s when they first opened for Diwali. That it was like right around Diwali, they said, oh, it's a festival of lights in their culture, so let's put up some lights. And then some of the customers said, oh, I like the lights, they're nice. So the guy took it to the extreme, and he put more lights. And then the customer said, we like the lights, even more. So we put up more lights, and then more lights, and then more lights, and more lights. And
In the
now,
summer, they have to, when they turn on the air conditioner, they have to cut half the lights.
right, because they blow the fuse. It's a riot. And they do this funny thing, like if it's your birthday, they like turn the lights like on and off and like make them blink and they all sing you happy birthday and
Yeah, a guy holds up a disco light. And
yeah, they have a disco, right, and then they give you that mango flavored ice cream with a candle in it. So it's a lot of fun.
How many of those restaurants closed
Yeah.
on 7th Street?
Yeah, a lot of 6th Street was like kind of like Indian Row, and there's not that many left anymore, to be perfectly honest. You're absolutely right. Trash and Vaudeville, luckily, is still there. It was founded in 1975 by Ray Goodman. The business is actually housed in the historic Hamilton Holly House, which was built in 1831. And Colonel Alexander Hamilton purchased the building in 1833 after the Civil War ended. And it was actually used as a meeting hall with apartments upstairs. Well, the entire building was designated as a landmark in 2004. But the owner of Trash and Vaudeville does not own the building. He's actually a minority partner in the building, he told me, but he still has to pay market rent. So when the rates go up, he has to, like he shows up to the meeting, but he said they don't care, they just raise his rent anyway. And he's, he wants to stay there. He said there's something about St. Mark's Place that just like spoke to him when he first started there, and he's like, even though I go out my door now and it's like frozen yogurt and noodles and cheap pizza, he's like, there's something in the street, this intangible something that is like, I'm staying here no matter what. So,
And that's Jimmy Webb, the manager. He's like a fixture of St.
right,
Mark's.
he's amazing. Jimmy is amazing. He's like Trash and Vaudeville. Like you can't. I mean, there are a lot of when CBGB's was in business, like, it was basically, only a few blocks away, they sold a lot of clothing to like, the punk rock bands and stuff like that, and they still do a lot of like furnished people. As he told me when we had interviewed him, he said, oh, Madonna just had outfitted her whole like tour, the latest tour that she had done with outfits from Trash and Vaudeville. Now, Jade Mountain, when I was speaking earlier about signs kind of just being thrown out, unfortunately, that's kind of what happened to Jade Mountain Sign. This was like kind of our Chinese restaurant since we lived very nearby, and we knew the owner. It's very, very sad. The reason why they closed was the owner's name was Reginald Chan. It was this grandfather, old man Chan, that had started the place. They were known for like authentic American style, like chop suey, their egg rolls. They had a great neon sign like that said chop suey, like an overhanging sign, a vertical one. It's not present in the picture, but it was on the upper left. But what happened is he was making a food delivery late one night, like basically it sent all his staff home, and somebody called in for a food order, and he's like, okay, and he made it himself, and he delivered it himself on his bicycle, and he got struck, and he got killed. And it was really, really sad. There was a ghost bike, like at the spot where he had gotten killed for a while. But the family couldn't keep up with the business. Like without him, they tried, like the wife and the son, they tried for a little while, but then it closed like a year or so afterwards. So it closed in January 2007. Now, Bringer is another one that we love just because of that neon sign. It's been there since 1918. The interesting thing about the neon is that it's actually on porcelain like tile. You see the blue? So it's very, it's a rare thing like that. You can't get like neon signs like that anymore that have that porcelain enamel backing. It's like a, lost art.
And you see at one point they added air conditioners to it.
Yes, yeah. Now, I think we're moving into Greenwich Village now. The Cafe Reggio is located on McDougal Street between West 3rd and Minetta Lane. The cafe's been there since 1927. It's famous for its espresso machine, which was imported from Italy by the original owner, Domenico Parisi. He spent his life savings of $1,000 to import the chrome and bronze espresso machine to the cafe. The machine was made in 1902, and it was the first of its kind that had a base formed by dragons and has an angel sitting on top of it. When filled with hot water, the machine makes an espresso in just under 3 seconds. And Mr. Parisi is actually credited as the first person to introduce the coffee drink cappuccino to the United States. So it has a really interesting history. A lot of kind of famous writers and art people hung out there. Magninoff Guitars on Bleecker Street by Jones is another business, thankfully, that's still there. He owns the entire building, so his business is safe. He's been there since 1965, and he sells only guitars, new and used and vintage, as well as parts and accessories, and he also fixes guitars. Patty Smith has called the place her home away from home, and she's purchased many guitars there.
He still gets the original gold leaf letters done on his window. He was very proud of that.
That's another kind of like an old craft that's.
But he said it's kind of dying also. It's harder to find people to do it.
Right, they just do it by hand. It's not like they use a stencil or anything. Now, the next place, Zito and Sons Bakery. That was it was very sad to us when it closed. It was open for 80 years, and it was the longest continuously occupied store in Bleecker Street until it closed in year 2004. Antonino Zito, who had immigrated from Sicily with his wife, opened their first bakery on West Broadway in 1919 and then moved to Bleecker Street in 1924. They lived in an apartment behind the bakery, and they raised 3 sons there who took over after he had died. At the time of its closure, the grandson told us that they were closing because, number one, the price of flour and their raw materials had gone up, and they didn't want to raise their prices, and also energy and their supplies had gone up, and even the price of gasoline, that they used to deliver a lot of the bread to the restaurants and stuff and in the area, that all these costs dove into their profits, and also there was this anti-carbohydrate craze
the low
at
carb
the time.
diet.
Nobody wanted to eat bread anymore. And that was the death of his business. And it was really sad because the place stayed vacant for a really, really, really long time.
Oh, yeah.
And I meant, when I say really long time, it was probably 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
It was quite a while. Now it's like a pizza place or something.
It's a restaurant.
Yeah, a restaurant, pizzeria sort of place. I mean, they still have the tile, but it was vacant for a while, so it was very sad. Murray's Cheese, now this Murray's Cheese is still in existence, but they moved across the street. So this photo is so old, this predates their expansion. This is when they were right on the corner of Bleecker and Cornelia. And it was founded in 1940 by Murray Greenberg. And we have a special affinity for the place because Murray's, you know, they have last name, so we're like, oh gosh, if they ever get rid of something, you know, but they don't have a neon one. That would be our awesome if they actually had a neon sign that we could somehow get our hands on. But the business was bought by Mr. Kaufelt, and when he expanded across the street, what's really interesting is that
There's these windows in the sidewalk.
right, he built
know if you guys
masonry
have seen
caves in the basement of the store to like store and age his cheese. So
And
if
you
you're
can peek
standing
down
in
in
front
there
of
and see
it,
'em.
like yeah, they have like it's a window and you can peek
Into
down.
this cheese caves.
Yeah, so it's like literally across the street from where it was. And they have they carry more than 250 different kinds of cheese from like all over the world, and they sell between 10,000 to 12,000 pounds of cheese a week. So it's a huge amount. Now, Waterview Importing is still there on Bleecker Street, and it's a fourth-generation family-owned business. It was founded in 1907. It was originally located on 195 Bleecker Street, and it had sold coffee, tea, and dried mushrooms and olive oil to the many Italians who lived in the neighborhood. And, you know, they don't do the olive oil and the dried mushrooms and stuff anymore, but they still have their coffee and tea place. Now, what's interesting about this is, you know, how it says fresh roasted. They used to roast their own beans, like, right there on the premises. But then what happened is, the new like laws came into effect in the city that you couldn't like have that pollution coming out. So they still do their own roasting, but they have a place in Williamsburg, a big like kind of warehouse.
And his grandmother lives in the top floor, right?
Yeah, the grandmom still lives above the building, so it's kind of neat.
Do they own the building?
Yes, they do. So that's again the saving grace of the place. Now McNulty's was located on Christopher Street by Bedford, and it's been business since 1895. And you can see in the window they have like these original huge tins, like to store their tea and stuff. And it's really, and you can see like the sacks of coffee and stuff. It's really amazing because they're original, like from the 1920s. And they have a scale if you go inside, and the date of inspection, like on the side of the scale, is 1911. You know, like one of those old scales. I think they have now electronic ones too, because they have to comply. I think the city makes them have electronic scales, but they have their old ones still, so it's kind of neat. Now, Ottomanelli and Sons is another family-owned butcher's business. It's now run by 4 sons, but you know, you can see Ottomanelli and Sons, so it's the 4 sons work there, and they're known for their prime meats, wild game, and fancy birds. And Peter Ottomanelli, one of the sons, told us that when all the boys like were working there when they were young, that the father like just made them sweep floors, that he wouldn't let them touch the meat or anything. And then gradually he let them like learn little by little, but first they had to learn how to cut everything by hand. They were not allowed to use a machine. And he said that is what like gives you the touch. Like he's like, it's really important that you know how to handle the meat and do everything by hand. And he said all their meat is super amazing because they pick it out themselves. Like they go to the Bronx and they go to the meat market and they hand select everything. They don't have like middleman. He's like, when you have a middleman, you get crap. He's like, when you go yourself and you look at it, he's like, and we know our meat, we only select the best. So it's really, they're really great, and that's a really nice place. Oh yeah, when you go inside, they have that old butcher block too.
Right.
I think when the city came around and told them to get rid of those old butcher blocks, I think they threw it down in their basement. So then, and when they used the plastic ones for a while, luckily they didn't throw
Yeah,
out
they hold
the
it
old
back
ones. So,
upstairs.
yeah, if you go there, I know that they have that old one that's like worn down in the middle. Now, Village Vanguard, located on 7th Avenue South by Perry Street, was founded by Max Gordon in 1935, and his wife Lorraine presently runs the place. It's one of the old, most famous jazz spots in the world, and it's the oldest continuing running venue for jazz musicians, and more than 100 Live at the Vanguard recordings have been issued there since 1957. Many great jazz artists got their start there, including Sonny Rollins, John Coltrane, Thelonious Monk, Miles Davis, and Dizzy Gillespie. They're known for their superior acoustics, because if you go back, Jimmy, there's it has a unique triangular shape. You can't really see in the picture because it just basically, we had to shoot it sideways because
It's just a
really
red
not
door,
a storefront, it's just like a door. And then you go down to the basement. But it's known for its superior acoustics because it has this unique triangle shape with a stage located at the tip of the triangle. So it's saying that the sound is sent like directly out into the audience without any of it getting lost. So, it's pretty neat. Now, Blue Note is another jazz club, which is located on West 3rd by 6th Avenue. It's been in business since 1981, so it's obviously not nearly as old as Village Vanguard, but it's become quite famous as well. It was founded by Danny Van Susen, who's committed to creating a jazz club that would treat the artists with respect while allowing the patrons to see fine jazz music.
That awning's supposed to be a grand piano, I don't know if you can.
Yeah, that's why we had to photograph it at night, because it's hard to tell in the picture. In the book, it's a little easier than this projection, but it's quite a beautiful storefront. Now, this was another one, like an amazing sign that we love, the C.O. Bigelow Apothecaries. It's located on 6th Avenue by 9th Street. It's was established in 1838. I think it even says so up there on the sign. It's the oldest apothecary in America. And what's really neat is you go inside, it has like a lot of the old, still like chandeliers and the floor. And actually where they sell makeup used to be like the candy ice cream soda fountain. Like they used to have, you could sit down and you can get an egg cream and stuff like that. Well, your parents got their pharmaceutical items, so it was quite neat. And then when that fell out of favor, they repurposed it for makeup. So
And they still have Mark Twain's.
yeah, I don't know if they show it to everyone, but Mark Twain used to get his prescriptions filled there, and in there they have a scrapbook, and they have like his purchase receipt. Like you can see Mark Twain, this, bought like this, and it's kind of neat. So a lot of famous people went there. Now, Minetta Tavern, we love this neon sign. It was opened in 1937, and it was named after the Minetta Brook, which actually ran southwest from 23rd Street to the Hudson River. It's not the original owners anymore. It's in 2008, Keith McNally, Lee Hansen, and Riyad Nasir, who had worked together in like 1997, they had other restaurants, the Odeon and places like that. They took over the spot and they renovated it, and it's much more expensive than it used to be. It was a way more affordable place. A lot of artists and musicians used to hang out there, but now it's kind of expensive. I don't know.
It was a tough shot to get, McDougal being empty.
Oh yeah, we went there. As you can see, it's wet out. It had just finished pouring. I think it was still raining. I remember holding the umbrella.
Yeah, we stood under the doorway at Cafe La and
over
waited.
the camera, and just but we were determined because we didn't want a lot of people in the shot. Now, Julia's is located on Waverly at 10th Street, you can see right there. It's the oldest continuously operating gay bar in New York City, and it served many members of the gay community since the 1950s. The building itself is pretty historic. It dates back to 1824, and the street level space actually operated as a bar since 1840. Famous patrons include Tennessee Williams, Truman Capote, and Rudolph Nureyev. Although not technically illegal, many people didn't realize this, but gays were not served alcohol prior to 1966 because the state liquor authority had a regulation against serving homosexuals in bars, considering them disorderly. And the Mattachine Society, which is a large gay rights organization, staged a sip-in at Julia's in 1966 in order to challenge that state liquor authority. And that basically influenced the courts to rule that gays had a right to assemble and be served alcohol.
The footstool in the bar is all little brass Dachshund dogs.
Yeah,
They say that that's who Julius is.
It's quite neat, so.
Yeah.
Rocco Ristorante, unfortunately, is no longer in business. It was in business from 1922 to 2011. They lost it was really sad. Anthony De Silva, we went to interview him, and he told us, you know, near the end there, that his rent was being raised from $8,000 a month to $18,000 a month. And he really wanted to stay, but the landlord just wouldn't budge with the rent. And what happened is they found somebody that would pay the $18,000, and they basically just like didn't even really give him a chance to even try to raise the money or negotiate or anything. They just said, no, you're out. And it's been taken over. The neon sign is still there,
But it's been like
repurposed.
Frankenstein
Yeah,
with
now it's
carbones
carbone.
over it.
Exactly.
Where is
So-
this?
It's on Thompson Street by West Houston.
Just a couple more.
Yeah, Arthur's Tavern has been in business since 1937, and the building is actually a designated historic landmark. And so one of the New York City jazz clubs as well, just like Village Vanguard, it's been pretty old. It's known as the home of the bird because Charlie Parker played there so many times. Monte's Trattoria is a business that's, yay, still there. It's been there since 1918, and it's now owned by chef Pietro Mosconi and his family since 1983. And, you know, he said that when he bought the business, he felt that it was very important to keep the signage because he really liked it, and he maintains the sign. And he felt very strongly about keeping the name the same Monte's because it was actually shortened from Monteverde, which is a city in Italy known as the Green Mountain. So, you know, it's pretty neat. The food is excellent. Now, Duplex is a legendary cabaret and piano bar that's been in business since 1950. And it's called Duplex because it has like dual entertainment, like upstairs and downstairs. That's why it was called Duplex. Many famous people performed there, including Stiller Mueller, George Segal, and Rodney Dangerfield. And the Duplex, believe it or not, is the first place where Joan Rivers and Woody Allen ever performed a stand-up routine. And Joan Rivers had never stepped foot on stage before. This was like her very, very first stage performance.
She was like a housewife.
Yeah, she said she was a housewife at the time. If you read her biography, that she mentions actually a performance at Duplex. And 50 years later, for their 50th anniversary, she went back and performed there. Oh, yeah, Christopher, right? Yeah. Waverly Restaurant was founded in 1979, and it's still run by second-generation family members. This is our night photo. We actually photographed it for our day book. It was totally different looking in that their old neon used to say steaks, chops, and seafood, but they updated the sign because the owner told us, oh, nobody buys, like nobody know what a chop is anymore. So he's like, you know, we're gonna do breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And we're like, oh, well, you know, we weren't too happy about that. We like the old sign, but you know.
There's a guy that runs the Dublin bar up on 79th Street. They have a big green, beautiful neon harp, and it says tap room underneath it. And he said tourists come in all the time and ask when does the tap dancing start.
They redecorated the whole interior.
Yeah, they actually expanded. They went back further, so it's bigger. Now, Corner Bistro has been in business for over 50 years, and it became famous actually for its hamburgers. And when it was reviewed by Mimi Sheraton, whom I don't know if you guys have went to, there was an event not too long ago that Greenwich Village Society for Historic Preservation held, and there was a panel of different speakers, and Mimi Sheraton, and they were kind of talking about preserving the restaurants, and she was there. But that's how she kind of put the place on the map because she gave them a favorable review.
Now, where is this?
Corner Bistro.
West 40.
Yeah, is it?
Like right by
Jane.
7th.
Jane.
Yeah, Jane and West
Yeah.
4th. It's where all those streets kind of like come together.
Yeah, it's like,
From Hudson.
right,
Yeah,
exactly, just in
right.
from Hudson.
Right, where 3rd crosses 10th and,
Here, Jimmy, that's the next one. We'll try to like
yeah, we're wrapping it up.
hurry through. Fedora was in business from 1952 to 2010. It actually became a well-known Greenwich Village restaurant because they were willing to serve same-sex couples, whereas many restaurants at the time would not serve gay men in the city. So sadly, this closed. It's still a restaurant. It's still called Fedora, but it's not the same. That's all I have to say.
It has a facsimile sign, it's not the same.
Yeah, the sign isn't even the same. They made a facsimile of it. Now, vegetable garden, yes, this was sad.
Baker Street,
Yep,
Right on Bleecker,
Portuguese.
by Carmine.
Carmine, yeah.
It's actually housed in a two-story wood frame house that was built in 1822, and it's the same house that we'll show the next
Yeah,
slide,
here's the
which
next.
is Joe's Pizza. They're, part of the same storefront, I guess you could say, that was split up. Vegetable Garden and Joe's Pizza was forced to close in 2005. Now, the owner of Joe's Pizza told us that both him, the owner of Vegetable Garden, and him, they did not want to leave, but he told us, quote unquote, the landlord was completely unreasonable, demanding a $1.5 million guarantee for him to stay, which is like ridiculous. He moved, the Vegetable Garden closed, which was like one of the last greengrocers in Greenwich Village. Because like it used to be called Greengrocers Row, like it was all, push carts and groceries. So Joe's Pizza, luckily, they managed to
Right around the corner.
basically right around the corner on Carmine Street, like
Thank God.
50 feet around the
Right.
corner. So they're still in business. This is another one, they were right in from the Vegetable Garden, newspaper tobacco. This had a great privilege sign. The
Yeah,
privilege
people
sign-
email us all the time about the privilege signs, they're the
Yeah,
ones.
those are ones given by Coca-Cola or Pepsi, like the big companies. In the 1930s, they became really popular, but then they kind of fell out of favor.
Can I just say something about that line of buildings? That was the building that Edward Hopper used for his painting.
Oh,
I did
nice.
it Sunday morning.
Yeah.
That row above the fruit place and.
Right,
Yeah, well now,
Excellent.
basically Joe's Pizza and the Vegetable Garden became Grom, which is like this expensive gelato, like $10 for like a little tiny cup of stuff. So, there you go, Bleecker Street Records. They were in.
that's a Starbucks now.
That is a Starbucks now. It's really sad. They were forced to close when their rent went up to 20, they wanted to raise it to $27,000.
But they got a new spot on 4th, right?
Yeah, he's on West 4th Street now, so you can
Yeah,
still.
it's a nice shop.
Yeah, so
He
that's.
doesn't have that nice sign though.
And then the last but not least is White Horse Tavern, which is, we chose as the back image for our New York Nights book.
Yeah.
That's been in business since 1880, and it's really fabulous, much, like their interior has a lot of original features, including like if you can't really see in the picture, but when you're standing outside you can see them, there's like little horse head, like chandeliers, there's like little white horses. And what's interesting about this is that it's one of the few wood frame structures still in existence in New York City. Eddie Brennan is the current owner, and when we interviewed him, he told us that these panels, like they look like panels, they're not actually panels, they move.
They tilt in.
Right, there's levers on them, and he said this was like the state-of-the-art air conditioning at the time that they opened, and what they would do is like if the bar became really smoky, they would just open those levers up, and the air would just circulate out, and there would be no more smoke in the bar. So he said it was really like to innovate that at the time in 1880 was like, amazing. He said it
Yeah,
was.
we shot this like real late at night, it was like 10 degrees out, because we didn't want any tables outside. It was a nightmare.
Right.
They have the best.
And of course, we love the neon sign. Eddie just refurbished it. We spent a lot of money refurbishing it. He told us that the place that we refurbished it for him told him that, just put up we can make you a fake one for $20,000.
Like
It'll be
LED.
cheaper than what you're paying to like refurbish the sign. He's like, no way, I'm keeping the old and original.
And that kind of sign comes from Ireland, he was saying, where they used to have just symbols, because a lot of people are illiterate, so you just go to the white horse.
Right, that's what he's saying. Why? Because why call it the White Horse? And he's like, that was like, he's like, people couldn't read, but they could understand the picture. So they see the picture of the White Horse, that makes sense to them, and then they can just say, we're going with the White Horse, even if they couldn't read what the sign said. Now, this kind of ends our slideshow, and I just want to thank you all for coming and tell you, really, the thing that drove us to keep photographing all these great places is we want to keep them alive. And if you go and shop there, then they will stay alive, and that's what our hope is, to just bring awareness that these small businesses are really an important part of the fabric of our community and help make the East Village and Greenwich Village, Greenwich Village.
And talk to the owners and the employees, they love it, they love to talk, so.
And the White Horse